We have a few loose ends to tie up. We'll look at the reign of the King as Jesus Christ returns to this earth and sets up his kingdom. What will it look like? What will be some of the features? What does the Bible tell us life will be like under the rule of the King? It's very clear, very plain, and lots of things to look at. So please join us next time as we look at the reign of the King. So we want to start today triptych number 7, which I've entitled The Reign of the King. Triptych 6 was the return of the King. When King Jesus comes back and returns to the earth in the same manner he left, meaning instead of coming from earth to the air, he comes from the air to the earth. And we have the return of the King. I promised you last time that I had skipped over a couple of chapters of the book of the Revelation, and my goal was to try and give you a super big overview, just a summary. So I'll come back to that for a moment, but we were in Revelation chapter 11, and after the end of the trumpet judgments, there's another parenthesis similar to the parentheses at the end of the seal judgment. And so John seems to look at a couple of other subjects before continuing on with these judgments. So in chapter 12 of Revelation, you have the woman, the child, and the dragon. It all seems to be a picture of Satan and his goal to oppose the plan of God. The woman seems to be Israel. The child seems to be Jesus Christ, and it's all a picture of that scene in spiritual war that's been taking place for years and years. But in chapter 12, Satan is thrown out of heaven, and he persecutes the woman and her child. In chapter 13, Revelation chapter 13, we have the beasts from the sea and earth, and out of humanity rises this Antichrist and the false prophet. And that's all pictured and seen in this evil beast from Revelation chapter 13. In Revelation chapter 14, there's the Lamb and the 144,000. We saw the 144,000 sealed earlier in the book of the Revelation, but now there's another intimate scene between the Lamb and the 144,000 in Revelation chapter 14. We have there the proclamation of the 3 angels. There's a proclamation by 3 angels. There's the gospel preaching angel, the Babylon is fallen angel, and the don't worship the beast angel. They make proclamations surrounding those things. There is a white cloud, and the Son of Man is pictured as in the cloud with a sickle. And a 4th angel cries out, "Thrust in your sickle." And so Christ thrusts in his sickle in the picture of like a harvest. And then a 5th angel follows out of the temple who also has a sickle. And that's followed by a 6th angel who has power over fire. And the 6th angel says to the 5th angel, "Thrust in your sickle," and so he does. In Revelation chapter 15, we have the vision of the 7 angels with the 7 last plagues. And those are the bowl judgments. In these bowl judgments, the wrath of God is complete. The chapter starts out with a sea of glass and tranquility. The temple, there's a scene of the temple, and we had looked at that earlier. We had jumped ahead to this chapter and looked at this and read it earlier. One of the 4 living creatures, seen back in chapter 4, delivers the bowl judgments to the 7 angels. The temple is filled with smoke, and nobody can enter into the temple until the 7 angels complete their job. And then you have the bowls poured out. Now let's jump ahead to One other parenthesis after the end of the bowl judgments. Another parenthesis, just like after the seals and just like after the trumpets. It's just the literary way John put this together. He stops, and we have two parentheses in Revelation chapter 17, which is the woman and the scarlet beast. And then Revelation chapter 18 is the fall of Babylon. The fall of Babylon. And that brings us to Revelation chapter 19. Now, before I start Revelation chapter 19, a couple of other loose ends. Number one, Dan graciously pointed out to me 2 weeks ago that I had a major gaffe. I don't know how long I had had that. I think in the process of copying my notes over and over, because I've done this in other contexts, but I'd never caught that I had a huge gaffe. And we talked about how long the two witnesses ministered, and I said 2.5 years. And there was another thing associated with that. I talked about 2.5 years. So Dan was graciously trying to let me find my own error. And how long do you believe that the two witnesses minister on the earth? 2.5 years. And so we went and looked, and somehow 42 months is not 2.5 years, so it's 3.5 years. 3.5 years. So I misspoke last time, and we'll try and correct that. The second loose end here, I had another handout that I gave you that I'm hoping may help you or just help you understand the various views and the various churches and how they look at the end times. Back in September of last year, I was reading World Magazine. It had an issue that was dedicated to the kind of the apocalyptic, some of the things going on in the world currently and some of the interpretations of that, and it was kind of an apocalyptic issue. They had a primer, what they called a millennium primer, and I read it and looked at it, and I thought it was a fair, accurate enough summary of the different views that you could get a grasp of what the three basic views are about the millennium. How I'm going to approach it and what we will be looking at here on the reign of the king is I am in the camp of dispensational premillennialism. But there is a view called amillennialism and there is a view called postmillennialism. That article, you can read it on your own sometime if you would like, and it just summarizes the various views. Another tool I can put in your hands that's more extensive than just those paragraphs there, if you are interested. Joel has a little primer that he's going to give out in theology, his theology class. So if you come to his theology class, you will get this. You don't need this right now because I think he's starting to get to the end times and he'll give it out there. But he talked to me about it and wondered if I wanted it for this class too. If you would like a copy of this, we have enough for maybe one per family. But it's called Four Views of the End Times. It's a more in-depth look. And this says 4, that gives 3. But this little booklet makes a distinction between dispensational premillennialism and historical premillennialism. Historical premillennialism being what was taught by the early church fathers in the 100s to 300s. Dispensational premillennialism is more recent in the sense that it was popularized in the late 1800s. But the basic difference between dispensational premillennialism and historical premillennialism is your view of the rapture. The rapture taking place before the end of the tribulation is dispensational premillennialism. In the historic premillennialism view, they didn't really talk about the rapture being before the end of the rapture, or before the end of the tribulation. They saw it as after the tribulation, that the church would go through the tribulation. Would you like one? Yes. All right, that's that loose end. So Revelation chapter 19 speaks of the return of Christ, and that's in fulfillment of Acts chapter 1 verse 11, where the angel said, "Why are you standing looking into heaven? This same Jesus will come in like manner as you saw him go." So Revelation chapter 19 speaks of Christ returning to the earth, and he comes with armies that follow him out of heaven. The chapter 19 also speaks of setting up a kingdom and a rule and reign of 1,000 years. I take that literally. I see him setting up a literal reign on earth over men, and I believe that is consistent with God's desire, and this goes back to the very beginning of this prophecy series, God's desire that all men everywhere glorify him while they admire and adore him as Father, trust him as provider, obey and serve him as King, and worship him as God. God desires all men everywhere to do this. And so that goal has not been reached, except in the sense that with the church there are believers who would recognize this to be true all over the world, but it's not true of nations. But someday there's going to be a time when it is true of all nations. Every nation that exists on the earth will glorify God, adoring him, trusting him, obeying and serving him. And so I see this setting up of a literal 1,000-year kingdom as one step further than has ever been taken before among men. Women and children everywhere will live out their earthly lives under the rule of God during this time period in history. It was true of just Israel at one point in time. And then it was true of the church all over the world at another point in time. But now it's true of all nations all over the world. So I take it literally that it's at least 1,000 years long. I believe that there will be a literal binding or imprisonment of Satan, and he will be rendered inoperative for 1,000 years, that same 1,000-year period. I believe human history will extend a little bit longer than that 1,000 years. It's not like we'll come to the end of the 1,000 years and, okay, now it's done. Because it'll depend on how long it takes Satan after he is released to organize another major deception and organize another huge rebellion against Jesus Christ. I'm not sure how long that will take. But Satan will be loosed after 1,000 years, and he will go out to deceive the nations again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me back up. According to Revelation 19, there's all kinds of horses assembled in heaven. There's one white horse in particular at the lead, and the one leading the charge from heaven to the earth is none other than Jesus Christ. And he has a name written on his thigh, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So Jesus Christ arrives back on earth again and touches the earth and walks on it, which he once did over 2,000 years ago. So that brings us to Revelation chapter 19 and verse 17. His first actions are battle actions. Revelation chapter 19, verse 17. Then I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the birds that fly in the midst of heaven, "Come and gather together for the supper of the great God, that you may eat the flesh of kings, the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, the flesh of horses and those who sit on them, and the flesh of all people, free and slave, both small and great." And I saw the beast, the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him who sat on the horse and against his army. This is a scene that I believe is described earlier in the book of Revelation under the sixth trumpet as Armageddon. And so I've got a little chart at the end of your thing there if you want to be drawing any pictures. If you haven't picked up a triptych, it's on the back table back there. But we're going to take our original tribulation period timeline and condense that and give us some space to work with the kingdom. So next slide. And so on this next slide, we have the kingdom, and now add Armageddon. So Antichrist has gathered for battle. In the sixth bowl judgment, the river Euphrates was dried up to make way for armies from the east to assemble for war near Jerusalem. And it's called Armageddon, which literally means Mount Megiddo. But ultimately, Satan is luring all these armies together into the same place to make war with God himself. There are 3 unclean spirits that come out of the mouth of the dragon and the beast, and they aid in luring everyone to this great battle in the great day of God Almighty. Here's a picture of what would be modern day Mount Megiddo. It's a huge valley, and there's this mound, this little hill in the middle of the valley. But this is modern day Mount Megiddo. There's a large army made up of many nations. Antichrist is leading the charge. They will attempt to defend themselves and indeed even go on the attack when Christ arrives, but it will be futile. The Bible says at this point, the Antichrist and the false prophet are captured alive. And I saw the beast, the kings of the earth, and their armies gathered together to make war against him who sat on the horse and against his army. Then the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These 2 were captured alive. So next slide, dear. That's capture. The rest of the armies are destroyed and killed, according to verse 21. And the rest were killed with the sword which proceeded from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. And I am assuming that this corresponds to the 7th bowl judgment, the thunderings, the lightnings, the earthquake, this great hail of Revelation 16, 17 through 18, and everybody's killed. Antichrist and the false prophet will go on trial in a trial similar to the great white throne judgment. That's a judgment in the future where those found not written in the Lamb's book of life are cast into the lake of fire. We'll get there in the future. But here it says, the beast and the false prophet, are cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. So that means that these two are one of the few people on earth who will ever experience only one death, one eternal death. The Bible speaks of two deaths for the rest of mankind. There's physical death, and then there's eternal death at the great white throne judgment, where they're cast into the lake of fire if they're not found written in the Lamb's Book of Life. So we have cast into the lake of fire. At that point, there's a mighty angel who appears, and he has a key in his hand and a great chain in his hand. That pictures with a key, a lock, or you need a key for a lock, and there's a prisoner who's going to be securely held in some type of a prison cell. And the prisoner is revealed in verse 2 to be none other than Satan, and his jail time is defined as a 1,000-year sentence. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit, or the abyss, and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and he cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal on him, so that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were finished. But after these things he must be released for a little while. All right? So he's cast into this pit, shut up, sealed. He will no longer be able to deceive anyone. He can't wreak havoc. He cannot counterfeit the program, God's kingdom, or his program in any way for 1,000 years. It does say that at the end of the 1,000 years, he will be loosed from that pit for a little while, where he'll evidently be free to move about again and wreak havoc and deceive for a period of time. All right. Then John sees thrones. Thrones are going to represent some type of rule, government. Kings sit on thrones. But notice that this isn't just a throne, it's thrones plural. And that's because there are a group of people that judgment is committed to. But who's the they? Well, we've already talked about this when we talked about the church being glorified. We're talking about resurrected saints who, in their glorified condition, are ruling and reigning with Christ. And so they are not introduced right away in Revelation chapter 20, verse 4, because there's a group of individuals yet to be resurrected. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. Then I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus and for the word of God, who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not received his mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead did not live again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he who has part in the first resurrection. Over such the second death has no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. So these are resurrected saints who Christ appoints to reign with him. He's the top king. He's the one in charge. He's the one who sets the agenda, Everybody is simply carrying out his plan, his wishes. They will follow in perfect obedience and holiness and righteousness, for they are glorified saints who will interact with the subjects of the millennium. So next slide, dear. Yep, there's the resurrection. Got a little arrow there for the resurrection. All right. Now it's at this point that I believe the stories, some of the stories and parables that Christ told his disciples just 2 days before he died, it's when these parables come into play. And these parables are fulfilled. What were those parables? Well, there's the parable of the 10 virgins. There's the parable of the talents, where the talents are taken and there's a responsibility assigned. You did well, they are assigned responsibilities based on how they performed in this life. Then there's the parable of the sheep and the goats, where the sheep inherit the kingdom, the goats are cast out. Christ told those 3 parables 2 days before he died. So who are the subjects who are being ruled? Well, I believe they are those saints that survived the tribulation period, who are some of them protected by God during all these judgments. And they are ready for Christ's coming, and they are invited to participate in this glorious kingdom. And they will experience a marvelous deliverance, and they will have the grand privilege of setting up a new world, a new society, new civilizations. Well, I shouldn't put it that way, because I think the nations carry over. There will still be a Germany. There will still be these various nations. But their only believers are restarting and reworking everything. And they have the aid of those who are reigning with Christ to help them set up everything. These saints will meet their glorious Savior face to face and be under his rule. Christ will walk on earth again with these saints. They will be ready for a new way of life that is full of peace and prosperity and where righteousness flourishes. And so the resurrected saints now sit on thrones, and they are appointed by Christ himself to rule and reign with him. So that brings us full circle. Remember that God desires all men everywhere, all nations everywhere, to glorify him while they admire and adore him as Father, trust him as provider, obey and serve him as King, and worship him as God. So here we are. We have everything in place to make that a reality. We have everything in place to see that fulfilled in glory. And God will bring glory to himself as his returning Son sits on a throne. And through the leadership of God's King, the blessings of God will flow through Israel to all of the nations on the earth, I believe. And when Christ returns and sets all of this up, what will the kingdom he sets up look like? How will the world change under his rule? And the Bible's not silent. The answer is not hard to find. There are lots of prophecies and predictions about life in the new kingdom, I believe, particularly in the Old Testament major prophets of Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel. But what will this look like? The short answer is it will be an absolutely beautiful paradise, perfect in every way, and you're going to love it. Satisfied? Good. All right, so let's move on. We have, you're not satisfied with the short answer? Pastor, please tell us more about this glorious kingdom. Well, that's just the kind of studious students that I know you are. It does my heart good. And so I'm happy to oblige. Here's the long answer. The long answer, number 1. All men everywhere will adore and serve him as king as he glorifies himself by establishing Jerusalem as the world's capital. By establishing Jerusalem as the world's capital. Psalm 50, verse 2 says, "Out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God will shine forth." Psalm 2, verse 6, "Yet I have set my king on my holy hill of Zion." Psalm 110, verse 2, "The Lord shall send the rod of your strength out of Zion. Rule in the midst of your enemies." Isaiah chapter 2, verse 3, "Many people shall come and say, 'Come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of God, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, for we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." So there are quite a few indications that God intends to make Jerusalem the capital of the world, and everyone will look to it as its capital city. Second, all men everywhere will adore and serve him as king as he glorifies himself by changing the world's government. By changing the world's government. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. Upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this." Psalm 47, verses 1 and 2. "Oh, clap your hands, all you peoples. Shout to God with the voice of triumph. For the Lord Most High is awesome. He is a great king over all the earth." Psalm 47, verses 6 through 8. "Sing praises to God. Sing praises. Sing praises to our King. Sing praises. For God is the King of all the earth. Sing praises with understanding. God reigns over the nations. God sits on his holy throne." Psalm 72, verses 8 through 11. "He shall have dominion from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth. Those who dwell in the wilderness will bow before him, and his enemies will lick the dust. The kings of Tarshish and of the isles will bring presents. The kings of Sheba and Seba will offer gifts. Yes, all kings shall fall down before him. All nations shall serve him." Psalm 72, verse 17. "His name shall endure forever. His name shall continue as long as the sun, and men shall be blessed in him. All nations shall call him blessed. Okay? So again, all of these quotes are coming from an Old Testament vision. What God revealed to David, what God revealed to Isaiah. This is something that God predicted he wanted to do, and I believe it is being fulfilled before our very eyes in this new government that is set up. One more. Oh, I'm sorry. This is further expanding the concept of what kind of a new government, or what does this new government consist of? Well, glorified saints will reign with him. Matthew chapter 19, verse 28, Jesus said to them, "Assuredly, I say to you that in the regeneration, when the Son of Man sits on the throne of his glory, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel." So the 12 apostles will seem to have a particular responsibility just to Israel, but saints from the church will be spread out over the whole world. Other Old Testament glorified saints will be resurrected and in glorified form interact with the saints and children of the saints in the millennium. Matthew chapter 8, verse 11, "And I say to you that many will come from east and west and sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven." Zechariah chapter 3 and verse 7, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, if you will walk in my ways, and if you will keep my command, then you shall also judge my house, and likewise have charge of my courts. I will give you the places to walk among those who stand there." Now you have to remember that Zechariah is a minor prophet, and he's prophesying at a time where Israel is losing the land. It's coming under judgment. They are about to not have a king at all. And ever since Israel was carried away captive and Judah was carried away captive, they haven't had a king. And so Zechariah is looking into the future and seeing where there's a promise that there are those who will. Church-age saints will be resurrected and glorified and reign with Christ over all the nations. Revelation chapter 5, verses 8 through 10. "Now when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each having a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, 'You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, for you were slain and have redeemed us to God by your blood out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation, and have made us kings and priests to our God, and we shall reign on the earth.'" So that's a scene in heaven. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 11 through 12, the Apostle Paul said, "This is a faithful saying, for if we died with him, we shall also live with him. If we endure, we shall also reign with him. If we deny him, he also will deny us." All right. That's time. There's a couple of more. I have more to my long answer. And so join us next week where we will resume answering the question, what does this glorious kingdom look like? What does the reign look like? All right, so I'll have Joel help me order some more of those, and we'll get that to you guys so everybody has a copy who wants one. Thank you. All right, well, there are still a few more aspects of this glorious kingdom that we want to show you from the scriptures, more Old Testament prophecies that describe a glorious kingdom. So join us next time as we study this further next week. Thank you.